the term investment, I think, is a loaded term because people are typically thinking about a for-profit return on investment,
Yep.
ROI,
Yeah.
and they're thinking about how can I put some money in and get some money out above what I put in. And for me, when you talk about investment, specifically when you're talking about communities, you're investing not in just getting some financial return. You're investing in the life of that space and those people, in their ability to return for themselves, not just financially, but economically, workforce-wise, and just having space to thrive themselves. And so, for me, holistic investment is really thinking about the whole of the community and the ecosystem, and placing your dollars where they can be leveraged best for the people that are there. I also think, too, there's this misnomer that you can't get any financial return investing in Black communities, for example.
Right.
And the issue with that is you actually can, but there are just systemic dynamics set up to where your typical vanilla investment is not going to work. But at the same time, if you would just talk to the folks there and invest something that's reasonable, there's a lot of space that can happen because there's a lot of hard workers, me and you both know, making things happen with what little that they do have. Yeah. So holistic means like thinking about who you're investing with, listening to them, understanding the problems on the ground, working with the folks on the ground, solving those problems, and then being flexible with your terms, or even sometimes grants, to jumpstart things, and focusing on the ecosystem as a whole, the community as a whole, rather than just having a laser-focused financial return.
Use one of my favorite words, which is ecosystem, right? Because I think that really reflects how, because an ecosystem is created of different parts, but that are working together sort of harmoniously, right? There's a sense of balance in an ecosystem. There's a sense of commonality, like my thriving depends on your thriving, right? And if you get unhealthy, I'll get unhealthy because in an ecosystem, we're all connected. So I always love that. But then an ecosystem also lets you maybe pinpoint an area and maybe improve its health. And then you get to see how that, increases thriving in other areas. So I have really liked that frame of ecosystem because it both holds the holistic framework and it gives you a chance to sort of pick an area to maybe do some targeted work and learning and support. A big part of my journey, my growth has been to understand the equality of other metrics of success. So you're right, not just did we make the return on investment, but what does that return even look like? And maybe return on investment should be joy, it should be pleasure, it should be rest. There are many ways to think about return on investment. And then as a parent, investment, to me, also carries inside it the idea of like long term. The investment I made at 9 and 10 will help them on their own. I might not even be around, right? But they will have tools that I invested into them to make their daily life work. So for me, holistic investment has become very people-centered. I've been so grateful to work with the Guild and you and others because it got me off of the transactional interpretations and to really practice putting the human ideas about investment almost above. And that led directly to talking about like financing justice, right? And really helping others understand there's a justice component to reparative finance when you're going to invest in Black and Brown communities, because the current way of investing makes sure that the power structure stays in place, right? Yes. And they will never invest in ways where the Black or Brown community could get strong enough to be like, no, we don't want that. They will invest eventually, but not in the stuff that turns into thriving for people, right?
For me, Atlanta is like a beacon, because I'm Black, right? And so it's a beacon of a Black city thriving and flourishing as itself uniquely, not trying to be anything but what it is, whether it be in working class communities or upper class communities of Black folks, just taking that on. The concern is that Atlanta has done all of this cultural work and historical work and even innovative work in community development in just businesses and culture and people. And it's attracted so much attention and so much in that now it's time to remove those people out and make it look nice and make it look cool and make it sound cool. But in reality, on the ground, folks are being pushed out. And so for us, it's all about where folks still are and they haven't been displaced, doing everything we can to stabilize, whether that be us building ourselves, working with developers that have been here, that are from here, giving them the access to the capital, giving them the access to whatever they need so that they can build with their community that they're from.
Yeah.
Trying our best to allow for folks to not, and I don't want to sound fatalistic, but slow the bleed of displacement, build permanently affordable housing, include folks who've been here and in communities in that process.
I think it's a growing ecosystem doing what you're talking about, right? And for me, what has been a little disheartening to observe is for so much of what makes Atlanta an international city, like Lonely Planet just named Atlanta as the only U.S. city in its top 10 cities in the world. And when you click on the link to look at that article, it is like dope black people. There are no white images, no images of white people in that whole Lonely Planet profile of Atlanta. The international face of Atlanta is young black people. Right? With multicolored hair on roller skates in short, the culture that black youth produces in Atlanta is what everybody looks at in the world. And the idea that you can move that actively out of Atlanta and still stay cool is one, just how? It's not possible, right? But that is not being protected. One of the most important things I got out of Transformation Alliance, working with Transformation Alliance and Spark, was this idea of art and culture and how utterly essential it is. And if you can lift up the existing history of a community and neighborhood through an art and cultural expression, that you combat this settler colonialism thought about empty places that gets imposed and reimposed, because the cycle that's happening, Avery, is I devalue you as a black person. So wherever you and your type congregate, I will devalue it, right? Until it gets to the point where maybe you leave, or there are few enough of you and you leave, and now this land is devalued, and I can get it cheap and refill it with the value that I put on it, right? And we talk a lot about development. The real estate development process is all about time is money, right? Yeah. That's why you can incent a developer to move, to do anything by saying, we'll expedite your permitting, we'll make it quicker for you, right? But the trust building takes time. So how do you bring two completely opposite time frames into interaction with one another? And I think the way is that the community should be so vibrant and active and present all the time. Invest in that. And when developers want to come in, there'll be a process for you to come in, deal with what you find there, get some proper approvals, you know what I mean? But you have to come, that's how the power structure should be. That you're coming into something, we're going to tell you how you interact with it, put something in here that works. Like, that would be the ideal for me. And I feel like Atlanta could be such a leader in that. But it remains somewhat wedded to a more traditional concept of real estate development. The power structure is really embedded in real estate development and the processes that get it there. So we just have to, trust and believe that if we keep educating young professionals and keep seeding a different way of thinking into the system, eventually they will support a different way of and we'll have to mourn the losses that are going to inevitably happen. But that's like the long-term fix, is to seed the power structure with these different ways of thinking and hope that it comes together in a couple generations.
I think we have to believe in Atlanta. We have to believe in the folks who are from here.
That's right. Who
are standing up. Or maybe they transit, they've been here for a long time. And we have to put power in their hands.
You do it the way the system wants you to, you'll get some level of reward, maybe not as much, but this idea of creating another way, a second, a third, a fourth way, that can be equally, impactful and be that holistic investment we were talking about before. I hope we're getting to that place too. Those things don't have to, you need to nurture the other ways right now, because one way has been set, right? And you know how to earn your rewards transactionally in that way. So how do we redefine reward, but let people, get the money they need to buy what they want? But it's going to be another way, and we need to create space that it's not, they can all exist, right? So that ecosystem thing can happen.
Yes.
You have to move at the pace of trust, right? Which is what it is, right? Sometimes trust is fast. You hit it with someone, you do a couple things, you get it. A lot of times it's so slow, right? And it's layer upon layer of interaction that gets you to a place where trust exists, and you can rest on it, right? You can abide on it. And so this idea that that scale is the best definition of success is one that had really, for me, was a challenge. And being somebody that now speaks really loudly against the basic idea of scale puts me, marginalizes me in some of these other conversations. So you have to fight for your reputation and your voice, and get louder in other ways to be like, you can't carve me out. What I'm saying is true.
I do think there's a personal, and then there's sort of the work. And with the personal, just as you said, you're always having to sort of renegotiate yourself all the time.
Yeah.
And you sometimes have to do it in high pressure situations,
Right.
where everything is on the line.
Yeah.
And you have to decide whether to be brave or safe, right?
Yes.
And this kind of leads sometimes into imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Of I'm always trying to okay, you have to, whatever you produce has to be the absolute best. Excellence is demanded because this is what it's going to take for us. It has to be like a trust and a faith in this can work out, even if it's not cookie cutter, vanilla,
right, yep.
or aggressive, because they're being aggressive. I can still deliver something that does not exist that will enable folks like myself to thrive, to have more space, to have more opportunity. And so I guess my challenge is always when I'm renegotiating those things, to just trust.
Yeah.
To just trust, like you said, that this can happen.
Right.
And everything isn't going to happen through work or grit. There's a togetherness that has to heal what has been acts of division. I feel like capitalism does put folks at odds.
Yeah.
And a lot of times folks who have the least puts them at the most odds.
Yes.
Because there's a competitive, scrapping nature. I feel like it's not enough to build a building that's affordable. It's not enough to provide space for commerce. There's healing that has to take place in order for these things to actually allow us to live into them.
Yes.
And that's the extreme challenge.
Yes.
I would say that is the challenge.
Yes.
Because you can give all the resources that you want. And this is why we work together. This is why working with developers who are from somewhere, their neighborhoods, who are doing the work, who have the relationships, who can share and grow together with the community with that level of intentionality is critical, because they understand that human healing aspect that goes along with just the bricks and the sticks. But being in the space we're in, that is the call.
Yeah.
And that is what we have to do. And so doing that requires us in heart and sort of in the work. Your name is personal and professional.
Yep.
To meet that challenge.
Yeah.
It's just hard when you're still, a human.
You're healing, you're healing, and you have to have your restorative, your own personal restorative time, right? You have to take care of the people in your immediate family. I tell folks all the time, community development is not going to come visit me when I'm old.
Yes.
Right? Community development is not going to give me grandchildren, right? So you have to take care of who is your circle, right, and yourself. And then you can add and expand who you define as your circle and your circle of care. These systems are made up of people, right? Choosing things, acting out of their own privileges, traumas, all the things, right? But, the idea that funding should be very long term. What you have described, it's going to take me all my life to heal me.
Yeah.
much, and hope that my healing produces a different outcome for my kids, which will hopefully produce a different outcome for my grandkids. Like you're talking generational work,
Yes.
right? So to drop money in anywhere less than 20 years commitment, I'm not saying it's not helpful. I'm just saying, set your expectations at the right level. But it's generational. It's going to take a long, long time. Funders, supporters, all the community development ecosystem need to understand the long-term nature of the work. And too often we design things to a short-term.
Yep.
We'll settle for that, right? That'll be good enough. Always going to plug for just flexibility, right?
Yes,
What you're talking about requires that, in the philanthropy world, it's going to be general operating, so whatever, flexible support, let it adjust, let it change.
I think that's brilliant, naming the need for flexibility. One thing that sort of always bothered me about like impact measurement or things of that nature is that there's these stringent terms on what I give you, quote unquote, and I have to stick to that, right?
Yeah.
So it's so like inflexible, but on the back end, the capital that you're giving me is so stagnant,
Right.
and it won't fit what I need, but it's just enough. But I have to like report and hit your metrics so that you can, essentially
look successful
you look
somewhere
good.
else, right?
You raise more money than you giving me,
Right.
And that's not to critique it because I understand there's a productivity element there, but yeah, just having space in the beginning, giving interest like periods where you don't have to return, a couple years breathing room. I really appreciate the flexibility and the bravery there that folks like yourself have sort of carved out there, and now we're seeing more folks be open and willing to engage in that fashion.
Well, I do have to say that the evolution of the Spark program itself kind of set us up to have that, because as the Spark program began to understand, and it goes back to the people who were implementing the Spark program took the lessons, right? They were on their own journeys, and so they were understanding their own traumas and privileges and doing that hard work, and it operationalized in the ways that they showed up and said, they also sought the most flexibility. I think we usually found the boundaries of whatever that particular funder was for Spark, but inside of that. And so when we would talk to our site coordinator in Spark and say, here's how we think we have to manage this vastly changed context for our members, and they'd be like, got it, So the Spark program evolved. The people in it evolved, and they operationalized that evolution as far as they could within the frame of the whole thing and the funders and everything. And that set up the leaders of the different tables, I think, to be brave, right? And to sort of offer to our members this display of here's how it could be, right? Like it was a tiny little fractal version, but like there could be a world where we suddenly drop all these outputs, right? And we're judging you on shades of green instead of worrying about red, real, you know what I mean? Like, but you have to start at like the tiniest little fractal of it to start building back out. I love the idea of fractals, right? That the big thing looks like the little thing. So I got to give props to the Spark program and the people in it for taking the journeys. Yeah, they took the journeys. I think they really did.